Welcome. I'm Georgia, your host of the Lil Gremlin Knits and Dyes podcast, and we're here today in Missoula, Montana, on the 7th of November. My U.S. viewers will know that the election results are mostly in. But I'm not going to talk about that because it's been a huge mess. So today, we'll talk about finished objects, whips, future knitting, dyeing, crafting, and then I will finish with shop and life news. So let's get right into it. First off, I'm drinking Vanilla Good Hope from Republic of Tea. It's a decaf tea, not caffeinated. It's rooibos and vanilla beans. And when we first got it, my wife noticed that it smelled a lot like some of her really fragrant pipe tobaccos, but not in like a bad way. So it's nice. It's fragrant. It has kind of a more muted rooibos flavor for those that find a strong rooibos flavor maybe too much. The vanilla bean really evens it out, and so it's a nice tea but not tea drink. And so that's what I'm rocking this afternoon in my Firehouse Brewing Company mug that my wife and I got when we were making our cross-country move from South Carolina up to Montana. We stopped in Rapid City and had lunch at the Firehouse Brew House. They have really good mashed potatoes. So, first off, finished objects. I had this idea in my head, and so I went to the dye pots, and I was thinking about like a skein that was like half like semi-tonal and then half rainbow fade. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. And so my first try, I produced this gorgeous purple because I did one side navy and I was trying to do a rainbow fade and it wasn't working. And so I was kind of able to salvage it. And so this color is actually available on the new Etsy shop, which I'll talk about at the end. And it's called Taphite, which is a mineral. So I'm naming things kind of on minerals and, whatever takes my fancy. But as a science background, that kind of makes sense for me. So it's a 50% tencel, which is a plant fiber, 50% recycled wool. And I know there's no silk in it, but it has just like this sheen, and you can kind of see here like this luster. Because it's recycled wool, I don't know the superwash, not superwash. I haven't knit up anything and washed it, so I don't know. But it's very soft and very silky feeling. And then I ended up dyeing up this beauty. It's kind of the semi-tonal ended up being a bubblegum pink, and the rainbow didn't quite come out, but there is this gorgeous, here, I'll unhank it. There is this gorgeous stretch that goes from purple to blue to green and then yellow kind of, but I'll need to fine tune it. And so this is also available on the shop, and it is called Rainbow Bubblegum. Not the most original, but I was kind of thinking of the chiclets that used to be in vending machines when I was very little and my family lived in San Antonio, Texas. And then I just had some like dye stocks I'd made up a while ago. So then I just started to play around since, hey, I have all my dye stuff out. So I got this not quite tonal that's green, and then it has like this beautiful like rich blue. So that could be, that's fun. Kind of in between a tonal and a variegated yarn. And then this last one is not on the Etsy because I frankly overlooked it. But it has purple and blue that are very close in tone, and then a green. So it's kind of like my Bruce Banner. So those are those. That was my dye pot exploration. And then I had this horrible crick in my neck. And so I made some rice bag heating pads. So for those of you that aren't aware, if you have rice or feed corn in cloth sacks, I'll back up so you can see it. So this is my big one. My wife oftentimes will have like lower back issues where she heats and ices. And so this is more for that. And so you can put these in the microwave for about 3 minutes. Mine, because I made them chonky. If you have smaller ones, you can do less. And they heat up pleasantly warm, but not gonna like burn you. But then because there's all this rice or feed corn, they keep their heat pretty well. So it's kind of a nice gradual heat rather than something that might be a little bit too hot. And then for my crick in my neck, I made this monster. And so it goes on just like so. And you can kind of see, it's kind of like if a life jacket met that like airplane pillow that they sell. And it's a beast. So I had to actually fold it in half like this and microwave it like that on a plate. But it stayed really nice and toasty, really helped like those little neck muscles that can really act up. So that was amazing. And so those, I'm thinking about doing something with that on the Etsy. Comment below if what shape or kind you would be interested in, because I was thinking about some maybe menstrual ones, because I have some little happy uterus fabric, or the lower back or the neck. I'm going to be prototyping the design, and because I have all the fabric and it's just rice inside, they're probably going to be fairly inexpensive to make, so fairly inexpensive to sell. So let me know what styles or designs would be something that you would be interested in. So that's all of my finished things. Not any knitting this week, but I have been knitting. It's just nothing got finished. So now moving on to whips. I have been working diligently on the sweater for my wife. And so this is the sleeve. When I took a picture on Instagram earlier, it was at about here and it fit on my cat Nibbler's head. And she's a sweetheart and she'll wear anything as a hat. So that was pretty fun. I'm just about, the way this pattern worked, it's kind of a hybrid of the Hurricane Ridge and Terry's Pullover. Again, links in the show notes. You do decreases of a certain, order up to here, and then you do increases, and then you increase further up to here, and then you do like just flat knit or straight knitting in the round until you get to the desired length, the armpit, and then you knit a little cap and you put that on waist yarn, and then you do the same thing for the other arm, and then it's a bottom up, which you then join the two sleeves and knit. So big progress on this, almost done with one sleeve, and it's Aran weight, I think a US 7 needle, so it goes fairly nicely. Now that I'm into the straight knitting, it's great, like TV knitting. And my other project, sorry, I have a chair over here with all my FOs. So this is the yarn that I showed, that I dyed taffite. And Woolly Wormhead, she's this amazing designer. I'll link her information down below. And she, as far as I know, designs exclusively hats. And so she has some really cool, innovative designs. It's fantastic. And so she's doing her knit along this month in November. And because of just circumstances and probably partially the COVID, she's doing a re-knit along instead of having a mystery knit along. And so I think there's 13 patterns that she has available, and you can choose any of those and participate in the knit along. So that's really cool. And so I chose the Sette Vele, and I'm not sure if you're going to be able to tell with this. I have some pictures on Instagram, but it forms this, like, it's this lace, very simple lace that done on like a garter background. And so it's this eyelet spiral that comes out, and it's my first top down hat. And so you're knitting from the crown down, and it's just these like lace that kind of forms these blocks of garter that kind of do this really cool zigzag. It's really neat. I'll link the pattern down below, and also information about the knit along, since it's only the 7th. So if a person wanted to, they could probably join. So I've been knitting on that, and I've been using my Flexi flips, which I have all 3 of them in the project. So unfortunately I can't show you a unused Flexi flip, but it's, they're made by Addi. And so they use the Addi rocket tips. One of them is, it's hard to tell here, but one's a little blunter and the other is a little sharper. And then there's this tiny cord that connects them. And so it makes, so I only have 3 needles in here, but it's not like this awkward cramped thing. And I've switched to them because I was having some issues with laddering, even though I was pulling on the 2nd stitch, and the Flexi flips have really helped me with that. So, and the knitting really stays on, so you have much less of an issue with, you know, loops falling off. I think I got mine from yarn.com, which is the web store. I'll link to them. They're amazing. And then, so those are my works in progress. I worked a little bit on the star blanket, but I'm kind of just in flat and straight knitting with it, and not much has changed. The one thing that I did get is I had been connecting all of my interchangeable cables together, and it was kind of disjointed and getting stuck a little bit. So I did get a 60-inch cable for it, and that's helped, but I haven't gotten to the next section yet. So I'll show that, pardon me, when I get to the next section. And so that brings us into dream knitting. So, or dream knitting, dream dyeing, that kind of thing. So the first thing I have is when Knit Picks came out with, so for those that are unaware, Knit Picks does a line of yarns called Felici, and the Felici yarns are a 75% merino superwash nylon and 25% nylon, and they do, I think, seasonal, maybe quarterly, well, I guess that's kind of the same thing, colors. And it's self-striping. And so this one's called, I think, Animal Crackers. But for those of you, you know, that are aware, you might recognize that it's also kind of the trans flag. So I picked up a couple skeins of this in order to knit the Nethergarments leggings by Elizabeth Zimmerman. And kind of the good and bad thing about Elizabeth Zimmerman is her patterns, I think, are almost exclusively in her books. So I had gotten this off of Amazon a while ago. All of her books are great resources. I used the December pattern, because this is kind of 12 patterns throughout the year, as kind of a base to knit my wife's first sweater. But the problem with Elizabeth Zimmerman is they're kind of pithy instructions. And so you do have to read the comments on the Ravelry pages and really think about what's going on in order to kind of figure out, okay, what do I do? But the great thing about it is she doesn't have really like sizes. She just gives you the instructions about how a pattern is created. And so you can kind of mix and match and really make a nice custom piece. And so she has a leggings pattern that you essentially use your gauge and your different measurements of your leg. So like your calf, your knee, your thigh, etc. And you join it into leggings. Before I had gotten the book and I was a little bit leery because that sounds, a little bit difficult. But I then was chosen for a test knit for Jessie May, her Ripple Buttshorts. And those are top down, but I got to knit a little bit of, in the thigh and then join at the crotch. And so now I have a better idea of like how that's constructed. And I think I could probably tackle the Nethergarments. But my wife is chronically cold, like all the time. And so I wanted to alternate the Felici, which is going to be decently warm. It's wool, with something else. And so I found on the knit picks this Eco Superwash alpaca. So it's 70% superwash fine Highland alpaca and 30% nylon. So it should wear like iron because of the nylon, but it's ultra buttery soft. And since it's alpaca, it should be very warm, which, will help my wife with, she has some circulation issues. And so that should help keep her warm in the winter. But, white's such a hard color because it's, gets dirty. And so I'll probably dye this a like charcoal gray and alternate stripes of charcoal gray with the Felici stripe pattern to kind of stretch my Felici and also provide a lot of alpaca to keep her warm. And so that's one project that kind of is in the works, but I haven't quite cast on yet. And then recently, Bunnymuff, I know, is her Instagram name, and I think that also might be her Ravelry name. And a while ago, she came out with this sweater that had a Colorwork sweater that was a cardigan, and it had a chicken motif with little mushrooms and little chickens, but it was an all-over Colorwork cardigan, which is a lot of a time investment. And I'm not a huge cardigan fan. I think once I learn to steek, I'll become a much bigger cardigan fan because then I can knit everything in the round and then cut my knitting and, do it all up and have a cardigan. But I'm not there yet in my knitting journey. And so I haven't been really keen on knitting cardigans. So she recently came out with a version of that on her, as a hat on Instagram. So of course I went over to Ravelry. I think it's called the Solstice Glow hat. I'll again link it down below. And so I have a ton of this. Hers calls for fine fingering and this is sport, but I figure I'll make it work. And so I have skeins and skeins and skeins of this bare single ply. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see it. Kind of rustic yarn from Briggs and Little, their sport. And so what I did is I got one of those quilting rulers, the acrylic ones that I had from my fabric life, and I took that and I put the big skein of Briggs and Little up on my Swift, and I figured out it would be 65 wraps of a 24-inch ruler to form a fifth of the Briggs and Little skein to make mini skeins. So I did up 10 of these because each hat calls for 6 colors, but you don't need any more than a mini skein of any of them, even the main color, which is pretty cool. And so I did these all up because I thought it would be really cool to dye up my own 6 colors. And then I was thinking that if you guys like it, I could even, make up little kits so that you guys could knit whatever 5 colors you wanted, 6 colors you wanted, and make hats or little, projects even. So, so this is something that I'm kind of exploring. And so then I was, talking with my wife, and I was like, okay, well, what colors would I even do, right? And so I have this book, Beginner's Guide to Colorwork Knitting, that I got simply to learn how to do stranded colorwork. And it has this section, maybe it does. Yeah, choosing colors. And so they talk about, color theory. And I, of course, promptly skipped this section because that's for suckers. But now the sucker is me. So, and so I kind of, read up, and I learned about different ways that you can choose colors off of the color wheel. And so the way that it kind of suggested was doing either a split complementary or complementary. So this is to the best of my understanding. With a standard color wheel, if you start somewhere and then you go 3 over your 4th one and then kind of make a triangle, that's a complementary. And then if you do a color, skip one, another color, and then straight across, that's a split complementary. And so I was thinking about that and looking at color wheels, and she has charts for chickens, geese, and pigs. And so you can kind of mix and match. And so I was thinking about it. And my wife suggested the cowie chicken, better perhaps known as the chicken in Moana called Hey Hey, where it's this, it's kind of this orangey yellow. Crayola calls it mac and cheese, and it kind of fades into this like blue green, and it's just incredibly vibrant. So I was thinking about, okay, and then I was like, oh, but everyone did red mushrooms, like the amanita mushrooms. But my wife suggested, if you do brown mushrooms, you'll kind of gain more colors to play with the chickens and pigs. And so purple, blue, green, and that mac and cheese yellow, according to the color wheel, would make a good combination. And so I'm thinking about doing so that's hue. And then the other part of color matching is tone. So tone means how kind of light or dark it is. And so in color work, you do want some high contrast, and you want complementary colors. And so for tone, I was thinking about doing a really light kind of purple shade pink for the pigs, and doing that kind of vibrant mac and cheese yellow, really saturated, with a really saturated kind of blue-green. And so blue-green, mac and cheese yellow, and a really light purpley pink would be 3 of my colors. And then I would probably do like a cream, so a natural undyed for 1, and a deep brown, and then I'll kind of wing the 3rd color. And so I think that's kind of for the 6th color, sorry. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking. Next week I should have all that dyed up so I can show you, and maybe get a better, and I'll purchase the pattern so I can kind of show you the, not the chart, but the finished object, or the finished pattern, and then my colors, and we'll be able to understand, or kind of in your mind's eye see it better. So that's that project. That's been a great bit of fun to really dig into color, both color work, but also just kind of the theory of choosing colors, because for years and years and years, my mom was the go-to person where it'd be like, oh, you want to do this project? We'll do this and this. And she just had a great color sense. Now I'm kind of trying to figure it out, and I'm like, oh geez, is there a book? And it turns out there is. So that's that. The other thing, kind of the last thing I've been working on is, I've been kind of thinking about Christmas cards, because obviously Halloween's over, time for Christmas. And so at a local bookstore in town, I'd gotten a pack of these where they're this coloring book cardstock, and this one looked like Santa was on drugs and the reindeer was supplying the drugs. And so I figured I'd start here. And so I've just begun coloring these, and what my wife and I are probably going to do is, we had gotten photos taken, and so we're probably going to go to like the Walgreens and get just normal photos printed out and put them in the cards and send them. So I'm starting early since I'm going to hand color all of the cards. So that's a fun thing. And that's all for the fibery bits. If you're just here for the knitting and dyeing, it's been great having you. If you're new, welcome. If you're coming back, welcome back. I was looking at the analytics and it was saying that a lot of people that are watching the videos aren't subscribed. So I highly encourage you to subscribe. And if you want to know immediately when a podcast comes out, you can do the bell, but I'm trying to do a pretty regular schedule. So, that's at your discretion. And that's all for that. And now let's move into the other stuff. So in life news, my surgery is still scheduled for November 19th. So that's coming up. I wish it was coming up a little sooner. But soon I start a liquid diet for 10 days before the surgery. And at first, when the doctor said that, I was like, oh no. Thinking about clear liquids, thinking like broth and juice, and that's it. But liquids, it was thankfully explained to me, are anything that is liquid at room temperature. So that can include things like a protein shake or yogurt or Jell-O. And so that's a little bit more doable. And then the last 2 days before the surgery will be clear liquids. So broth, tea, that kind of thing. So that's coming up. My wife actually got me a little plushie. I think these are from a place called I Heart Guts. We got it off Amazon, and it's a little gallbladder. So when I lose mine, I'll still have one. So there's that. And then the big news is that I have been a busy bee, and I started a Patreon and an Etsy. So let me tell you about these. So, first I started the Patreon, and the Patreon there's 3 tiers. There's going to be the basic tier, the mid tier, and the higher tier. And I just want to first say, no one is obligated or even expected to do the Patreon. This content, always going to be free, always going to be here, coming to you straight from my, studio in Missoula, Montana. But the Patreon is a way that I can kind of, do more. So, when I do Christmas baking or, fun stuff, like I might film tutorials. I'm going to do some like how I make my gingerbread cookies, how I bake bread. And so all of that stuff is going to go on the Patreon. Also, one of my fun arts and crafts moments is Shrinky Dinks. So I don't know if everybody's aware, but what Shrinky Dinks are is they're number 5 plastic. So I think the plastic that a lot of deli containers come in. When it's heated at 325 for like 2 minutes, it shrinks up, but it'll lay flat. And so if you rough it up, like with sandpaper, you can use colored pencils or Sharpie markers to color on it. And then when it shrinks in the oven, it gets more vivid. And any details you put look like absolutely great. And if you put a hole punch in it, you get this nice sturdy hole. So I made little dumpster fires, and I put 2020 in the corner, and I put a little hole. I didn't realize how much they were going to shrink, or I didn't think about it. And so originally I was thinking I would make stitch markers, but these are kind of large, you can see. And so these would be more like progress keepers, or they can be ornaments, they can be fridge magnets, the world's your oyster with this. Right now I have one patron, and shout out to Allison. And she I'm going to thread some yarn through it, and it'll be just a little darling Christmas ornament. So that's these guys. And it requires very little skill. which is why they're perfect for, you know, me, because I'm not, you know, big into the drawing and whatnot. So that's those. The 2020 dumpster fire is, it's available. The Shrinky Dink is available to all levels of patrons. So there's that. So if you want one, just sign up on the Patreon. We have tiers of $1, $5, and $20. And the first tier is the Shrinky Dink and then access to a monthly Ask Me Anything. The second tier gets the Shrinky Dink, the monthly Ask Me Anything, and then they get an exclusive 30% discount on my Etsy shop. And then the top tier, the $20, what's really cool about that is I'm offering to dye a custom colorway in a sweater quantity at the cost of bare yarn for me. So, and when I say sweater quantity, I mean sweater quantity. You come to me and you want 12 skeins of worsted weight yarn, we'll dye it up. And so that'll probably include some vid chat or some emailing to really work out what the custom colorway is. And then I'll dye up some mini skeins to kind of, you know, give you some choices, and then dye up all the skeins. So that's, and that would be a once a month thing. So, and that's an option. I'm not going to just like throw yarn at you until the end of time. Like, you would have to contact me and say, hey, I want to do a custom colorway. And I'd be like, okay, cool. So those are the 3 tiers. And any vlog content that I make will go on the, sorry, my camera generally, will go on the Patreon first. And then at a point in the future, it'll probably be released to the YouTube. So when I make gingerbread cookies or bake bread or make my super extra secret recipe beef stew, all that's going on there. So that's pretty cool. And then I made the Etsy. I had always wanted to make the Etsy, but after I had a patron and I made the Patreon, I was like, oh no, I need an Etsy to discount, right? So I put, I think there's 6 skeins out there. It's mostly the stuff that I had kind of been dyeing over the past, you know, two or 3 months. And so there's some variegated, some more tonal. Most of it I actually showed today. So head on over there and give it a look. I'd appreciate it if you favored the shop, but hey. And if anything, you know, reaches out and grabs you, you know, feel free to get that. And so that's the Patreon and the Etsy. Those are the new things. I'm always going to be here producing the content. And then I'm on my, you know, Instagram and Facebook as well. And so that's it, I guess. Stay safe out there and have a good one.